legendary quarterback for your Minnesota Vikings, back in the news last night in the wake of Peyton Manning throwing 7 touchdown passes in a single game. Who does he talk about? Well, one of the other guys who's done it, Joe Kapp, who still amazingly, mysteriously, well, maybe not so mysteriously because there was a conspiracy there, didn't make that official list of 50 greatest Vikings of all time. He's on that list as far as I'm concerned, and Mr. Kapp will join us next here in the Fan.
Great Canadian quarterback out of Cal. He kicked the crap out of a guy on YouTube a couple years ago, too.
Brilliant stuff from Peyton Manning last night. Manning ties an NFL record by throwing 7 touchdown passes in a 49-27 victory over the Ravens to start out, to debut the National Football League season. And indeed, the last quarterback to throw 7 touchdown passes in a single NFL game, the aforementioned Mr. Kapp for the Minnesota Vikings in 1969. And as we reintroduce Joe Kapp to our audience, Joe, I assume you got a chuckle out of that, including the fact that Peyton apparently thinks that you not only played in Canada, but that you are Canadian. Joe, can you hear us?
Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
I've crossed a lot of rivers, but not the Canadian. I wasn't born there, but that's part of the game of professional football or professional sports. That players got to go where they tell them to go. They do the draft system. In our day, way back, there were 12 teams in the National Football League and 9 teams in Canada. And you know what it is now, 32 teams going after records. So that's where we are today. We're here in sunny California.
There you go. And yeah, I assume from your perspective, it's nice to be remembered every once in a while. I know you probably don't live for it, but it probably is not too bad to be linked with Peyton Manning and for people to be reminded of that occasion on, I believe it was September 28, 1969, against the Baltimore Colts, when you indeed threw 7 TD passes in a 52-14 victory. Not bad for people to maybe some of the kids who maybe have never even heard of you, to be reminded that pro football has been going on and some guys have been doing some pretty amazing things for a long time.
Well, it was different. There's no question about it. The game now, we have free agency. I can't pick up the paper, the sports page, $140 million. A lot of football players, the league would not have survived with a lot of pain and consistency of coming to work as in pain. And so the game is built on people, and it's too bad that we're having all this concussion reports, and a lot of players did not make it. They did not get independently wealthy. Yeah. And I think, I'm more proud of the battle I fought with the National Football League to get free agency as opposed to being on a football field throwing touchdowns.
That's a very fair point, and we'll try to get into that as well in a minute. I do want to know if you have any particular recollections of that ball game. I believe it was a home game at Metropolitan Stadium. Looked like pretty decent weather, 53 degrees, not much of a wind, and you guys had no trouble, as I said, dominating, and you either. I mean, was there ever a point in the game where you just felt like, okay, I just feel it today, my team feels it today, and there's not going to be any stopping us?
Well, let me say this. Yes. What was bad about the day in any way? The weather was good. The field was flat. We were a healthy football team. Nobody hurt on our team, I don't think, as I recall. But really, we had played the Colts in a runner-up bowl game the year before, runner-up to the Super Bowl. And they had put a blitz on us that was really very difficult to block because they took dangerous chances on not covering people. And so I studied that film all off season, and come game day back in '69, they tried to do it again, but obviously they were not successful. And if you look at our team and our players, quite an assortment of players. I believe Gene Washington was the only receiver that caught 2 touchdowns. The rest of them only got 1. We rationed them out.
You did. In fact, I'm looking at, you had first quarter, you hit Osborne first on an 18-yarder out of the backfield, then Gene Washington for 83, then Bob Grimm for 21, then Kent Kramer for 13, then another one from Gene for 42, then John Beasley, and then last but not least, Jim Lindsay. So you did spread the wealth. You finished with 28 completions, 43 attempts, 449 yards, 7 touchdowns, 1 INT.
Well, let me just once again say that. The variety of, and that was for a very, conservative coach. Mr. Grant didn't necessarily like big numbers.
Yep.
And we don't necessarily want to have big numbers, but when I came down from Canada, that was a very exciting place to play football. The wide open game that they play up there, and the wonderful people up there. So I come down to Minnesota, and I earned the job, I think. But doggone it, Mr. Grant wants me to call running plays. And that's fine and good. I like to call them too, but they're going to run me out of the league if I don't start throwing the ball a little bit. So we ended up, as you know, winning, going to the Super Bowl that year.
Yep.
And total team effort, 40 players for 60 minutes, and we'll appreciate those great moments as a team.
We're chatting with Joe Kapp, who was back in the news a little bit yesterday because Peyton Manning threw 7 touchdown passes in the Thursday night opener, victory over the Baltimore Ravens, and the last time that had been done, Mr. Kapp did it for the Vikings in 1969, as he is now indeed joining us. How did you end up with the Vikings from the CFL?
Well, I'll tell you how. The monopoly. Mr. Roselle, you remember him?
I do.
I was playing in British Columbia and treated just tremendously of all the management that I encountered. And I said, I want to, after I win we win the Grey Cup, I want to go to the NFL. And so they said, fine, let's just win the Grey Cup. So we did it. And at that time, the AFL was really recruiting hard, and Mr. Davis talked to me, Coach San Diego, all-time great there. And I so end of the line, I made a deal for the future, because you had to do that because of the option clause that the teams had on it. This is very complicated, but not really, because they just controlled where you went.
Yep.
I thought I was going to go to Houston and get to be with some of my Latino pals and relatives and all that, but the final say was go to Minnesota. I really didn't know where Minnesota was. It was a little bit south of the North Pole and Saskatchewan. So, had a great career as a migratory quarterback.
You most assuredly did. I'm still, and I don't know if you and I have talked about this or not, the Vikings a couple years ago for the 50-year anniversary had a deal where it involved votes of, I think, some people on a board and some fans and so forth about the 50 greatest Vikings of all time. I still am embarrassed for the organization that you're not on that team. I still don't understand it. It still confounds me, given what you represented. And I, some people point to stats, and I go, well, stats don't tell a whole story about a player's success. And at times like this, you had some pretty damn good stats too. But does that? I don't know. I mean, maybe you're past all of that, but does that bug you at all as a competitive guy? How in the hell are you not on that list?
Well, I don't know. I'm an honest person, maybe. I don't know who you offend, or and popularity contest is. I guess you need to do that as a quarterback, but more than with the fans and or management. I think the popularity contest is in the huddle. You got guys that we played with in the huddle, and my relationship. I'd call a play in the huddle. I wouldn't even have to give the snap count. And then they said, "Well, how do you do that?" I said, "Well, I just go into action when I get the ball." So, and that's the kind of thing where you trust. You got to trust your teammates, and that wins a lot of games. And when the going gets tough, you trust your pal, you trust your defense, you trust your blocker, you trust your receiver. They trust you, and that's when you have a winning team. So, honors.
Yep.
Right now, in my opinion, the worst thing that's happened in terms of honors is Vic Tingelhoff was the best center you could ever have. He not only never missed a snap, he went down on kickoffs. Mick Tingelhoff, great football player. Put him in your honored group. Okay, so
Hall of Fame.
So
right.
Next question, boss.
Fair enough. Joe Kapp is our guest in the family. Well, you mentioned, like I said, you were a pioneer even when it comes to free agency issues, and I don't know. I wonder if some of that is still part of the issue regarding making that 50 greatest list, because you had contractual issue. You played, I believe, the 69 season, the season where you threw the 7 touchdown passes without a new contract. It was an option deal, and then you ended up being a free agent for the 1970 season by the NFL's rules, all right, at that point, and that made you very much a pioneer. We're talking 43 years ago now.
No, okay, now I was a free agent. I didn't want to be a free agent.
Yep.
The work it takes to get to the Super Bowl. We got to the Super Bowl. I guarantee you we win it. I guarantee it now that we would win the Super Bowl the next year. Well, they did not pick me up. They let me be a so-called free agent, which is bullshit. They sent me to Boston, 2 number 1 picks. What's the value of a player? 2
right.
number 1 picks. So I go to Boston, and now they tell me I got to sign a standard-bearer contract after I played one of the worst years anybody could ever endure in Boston with the owner. They offered me to be a player coach. I said, that's how dumb you are. You can't do that in football. So, end of the line, the game ended for me.
Yep.
And it ended up in a lawsuit of which a summary judgment said that the NFL should change something, that this man's trade is being restrained, and then later in a 30-day trial where all these people, including Mr. Shula, that was beaten in that game 52-13, said, "Oh, Joe Kapp is he'd be a good kickoff man," and I thanked him for that, and so it's been a great career.
It has been. Well, let me ask you this. Let's bring it to the present here, if I can, a little bit with you, Joe. We just had, and you talked about it earlier, that a lot of guys didn't make great money, and a lot of the pioneers kind of left behind and suffered lots of very serious injuries. There's just within the last couple of weeks, there was a big settlement between former players and the National Football League, a little less than, I think, $1 billion. And a lot of people view it as the NFL got off a little easy, maybe a little bit too easily. Others say, hey, a lot of these players they couldn't wait for this thing to go through the courts forever. They needed money, and now at least there's some closure. What was your reaction to that decision to settle? Good, bad, or indifferent? What do you make of it?
I try to keep in touch with players that I played with and players that I played against, management people that you might have an idea of trusting, friends in the law business. My son JJ is the public defender here in Santa Clara County. You try to keep up to speed, but what is in my opinion, what has happened here is there's no entity. There's no entity. The players' union was so weak, they're pitiful, and they might take they don't. The modern players don't need a union. Okay,
right.
So where's that organization? Then you get to the organizations. There are guys out there that are having shows on the internet and like that say it like it is to a great degree, but on the other hand, there's no entity. There's no there. Who are you going to be part of? Well, a raggedy-baggedy group of ex-players that I don't think are going to get listened to by the NFL. And so NFL then makes a deal with whoever they want to make a deal with. And, I hope I'm not shot or assassinated here tomorrow.
I think you're going to be okay. And you've always kind of prided yourself on opinions. That's one of the reasons we love having you on. Let me ask you also about, I don't know how closely you still follow the Vikings, if you follow them closely enough to have an opinion on, the season, of course, starts Sunday for the Vikings against the Lions. And a lot of the discussion is centered on the quarterback position, which has always been so vital, now maybe more than ever, on whether Christian Ponder can take the next step. Do you follow this club still closely enough to have an opinion on the purple?
You follow your heart. I trained a lot of people here. There's a fellow named Dan Casey. He's the greatest Viking fan. There's not in Minnesota they don't have a Viking fan like Dan Casey, and so I get all the up to date stuff, and I see how they're. I watch the games when I can, and I try to sneak into Minnesota, maybe see one this season. But it's in your blood. BC Lions are in my blood. I'm a loyal Lion.
Right.
I'm a Golden Grizzly. The Bears, when I took the coaching job, and I basically told them, my team, I says, you got to make a sacrifice if you want to succeed in the game of football. So I said, here's my sacrifice. I'm giving it tequila until Cal wins the Rose Bowl. Now, thank goodness for California wine.
That's a great. That's a good point. So on the purple, what do you think? Good season. I mean, they had a good season last year. Can they follow it up?
Yeah, I'm not sure. One way you look at the sideline on games. You tell, in my opinion, if you look at the sideline and see the intensity and or the attention and or how much fun they're having, and I don't mean laughing and scratching and giggling.
Right.
I'm talking about true interest in the game. Whatever position you're playing, you should be looking at your that position out on the field and be an extra pair of eyes. We did a little thing, 40 for 60.
Yeah.
Well, it means that adds up to 100%. so I sound like a preacher here today.
It's okay. Yeah, well, you've always been part quarterback, part preacher, I think. Hey, Peyton Manning also, of course, mentioned that fight that got picked up on YouTube where you went at it with Angelo Mosco on your former CFL rival. A couple of the emailers will want to know, have you guys kissed and made up yet? Is all forgotten now, or you still got bad blood there?
No, it was an age-old kind of pain that he had a dirty play when we played in '63.
Yep.
It hit my man Willie Fleming in the back of the head, and okay, you can't forget it. It was such a strong incident in the Grey Cup game, so that years later, when you call it on him, he said some words to me that were unacceptable, and so we did what we had to do. And I'm not proud of it.
But you didn't let it fester. That's the good thing. You got it all out there, and that's you. That's the competitor in Joe Kapp. Listen, we'll try to keep in touch with you over the course of the season. We appreciate the time you gave us. Glad you got the youngsters could be reminded of what you did a long time ago, 1969.
Call me when you get a moment, and don't wait 45 years for me to be on your program.
We'll make that pledge. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Joe Kapp, as irascible and a bit crazed as ever.